Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi, Maaseh Sheni, Perikei, Halacha Gimel, and starting today, Halacha Daled. We're learning Daf Nun Daled, and we left off on Daf Nun Gimel, Amid Beis, 2 lines before the bottom of the Amid, in the beginning of the second to last line, and we are in middle of the Sugya, discussing whether Kohanim, which are actually members of the tribe of Levi, whether Kohanim are entitled to receive Maaser Rishon, or whether Maaser Rishon has to be given Davke to a Levi and not to a Kohen. Now, as we will see in today's Sugya, that there's a huge difference between separating the Trumas Maaseres versus the giving to the proper recipients of the Trumas Maaseres. You'll understand what I'm saying, mamish, in the beginning of today's Sugya. Now, this question today will be debated amongst two Tanoim, between Rabbi Yeshua ben Hanania, which is a Levi, who is a Levi, and Rabbi Lozer ben Azariah, that we know is a Kohen, right, from the Gemara in Berachos. Daf Chav Zayin, he's the descendant, the 10th generation from Ezra HaKohen. That's why he was appointed to take over the place of the Nasi, who was demoted without the fear of there being some sort of repercussion because of the yichus that he had. Anyways, we'll see that Rabbi Lozer ben Azariah, the Kohen, because of Rabbi Akiva, ultimately retracted his opinion, which was that a Kohen is allowed to receive, and he concurred ultimately with Rabbi Yeshua ben Hanania that Maaser Rishon must be dafke given to a Levi, and we'll see there'll be exceptions to that. Now, we're going to have a very interesting aphorism. Actually, there'll be two statements that were common in the times of Chazal. They both shared the same content, and that is that once a given state has been established, it tends to stand that way. It's very difficult to change it. Or let me word it in the other direction, that if you want to change something, the best time to change it is before it asserts its place. In the beginning of the beginnings, if something is off, it's very easy to change it relative to once that has become established, as we'll see how this will apply to our sugya. And we're going to go back. The Gemara today will go back to the end of Halacha Gimel. The Mishnah there was speaking about the two types of biur. Biur could mean to remove it from your possession and to destroy it, which is what it means by Maaser Sheni. By Truma, for example, biur means make sure you give it to its proper recipient. And then the question of the Mishnah was, what happens if there is a mixture? There's a food that is a mixture of Maaser Sheni and Chulin. The time of biur is here. By Maaser Sheni, biur means you have to destroy it. We're speaking about a mixture in which there isn't shishim. You don't have the regular quantity that in other areas of halacha would render the minority amount to be halachically nullified. No. But on the other hand, it's mixed in a way where it's no longer discernible. So it's not batal b'shishim, but it's not be'en. We have a machlekes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel is the one that holds that since it's not discernible, there is no obligation to be mevayed it, as the Gemara is going to expound both Shitas Beis Shammai and Shitas Beis Hillel. That will be more or less the ending of Halacha Gimel. And then in today's daf, we'll begin Halacha Daled. That will the Mishnah. We're going to learn the Mishnah. That will discuss two different dinim. Din number one is that when does the question will be, does the requirement of biur, whether it means to remove, like by truma, to give it to the kohen, whether it means to destroy, does it apply to a product that didn't even reach its status of tevel? That means that there wasn't a gemar melacha, there wasn't a meruach, you don't have to tithe it, but the time of biur is here. Does biur mean that now you have to see to it, to bring it to its gemar melacha, and to separate the trumas of maaseres and either destroy the maaser sheni and give the truma to the kohen? Or no, since it's not even tevel, so it's not subject at all to the obligation to the mitzvah of biur. That will be the first topic of the Mishnah. Second topic of the Mishnah that will come with the story will be what were to happen if a person is physically far away from their trumas or maaseres when this man of biur comes. And again, let's go with the biur of truma. You have to give it to its recipient. What do? How do you give it away when you are not there? So there are ways of doing it, and actually such a thing happened with the greatest of the Tanoim, as we will see in the Mishnah. We had the story quoted before. Chavra, it's great to be back. Daf Nun Gimel Amid Beis, 2 lines before the bottom of the Amid. So again, the question of whether a kohen is allowed to be a recipient or not. And let's go. Says the Gemara, writes the beginning of the second to last line, that va'af al gav da'at omar ein noisnin meiser lekuhuna, that even according to the opinions that we had above, that hold that meiser ishin must be given dafka to a Levi to the exclusion of a kohen, even though you can argue a kohen comes from the tribe of Levium, but based on psukim, that no, it has to be given dafka to the Levi. But there's going to be, everyone will agree in the following scenario. Moide, everyone will agree, she'ein moitzian shaloi miyadai, that if a kohen is the one that grew the crops, the kohen is the one that separated before giving the truma so meiseres, just like when it comes to truma, just for the record, if a kohen owns land, and even though that the kohanim and the Levium were not given a chelik by the chalukas haaretz under the Yeshua, but make no mistake, over the years, various ways, not only by buying, because not everything that you buy stays with you forever. Fakert, sometimes, psukim in the chumash, sometimes something belongs to the Beis HaMikdash and it's divided amongst the kohanim, and it stays with the kohanim la'olam vod. And whatever the scenario is, same thing with Levium. The Levium were given the Ari Miklat. However it came to be that they own land, which they did, if a kohen or a Levi grows crops, first of all, they are obligated like everyone else to make the separation of Truma Somaisras. So the kohen will separate Truma. Elamah, the kohen now can keep the Truma. He gets to keep it, but he has to separate it. Same thing with the Levi. If a Levi owns crops, the Levi has to separate Meiser Rishon, but he gets to keep it. Of course, he has to separate from the Meiser Rishon, Meiser Mena Meiser, that he gives to the kohen. Step number one is that whether you are a kohen or a Levi or a Yisrael, the chiyuv of being toirim or ma'aser is the same. However, if you are a kohen, if you are a Levi, you can gift it to yourself. So now the Gemara is adding to that a crease, and that is that if a kohen separated, was the one that owned the product, he owned the crop, he separated truma and meiser, he can keep the meiser Rishon, even according to the opinions that say that a kohen is not allowed to be the recipient from someone else's meiser Rishon, moide she'ein moitzian shaloi miyadai. Before we turn, look inside the Marafulda, the last one on the Amid, around 6 lines from the bottom. This is being said by the Gemara, by Rabbi Yochanan, that the koyad eliel, and it's referring back as we explained. Meiser means Meiser Rishon here. L'koyin moidehu she'ein moitzian ha'meiser min ha'koyin mimashe godal b'sdei koyin. V'af al gav the gam ha'koyin chayv lahafrish min tfuas sodeu hatruma and umeiser elo shemafrishin. Just like when it comes to the truma v'hein shaloi, he gets to keep it. Same thing is with Meiser Rishon v'ein moitzian shaloi miyodei. Now, where do we get that from? No, it's Mela, if a kohen is allowed to be the recipient of Meiser Rishon, why not? He gets to keep the Truma, he gets to keep the Meiser. But how does the Gemara know that everyone agrees to that? Daf Nun Dalid, and that's a source, a pasuk. And my Tama, all of this comes from Psukim and Parshas Koirach. Since it says, Ki sikhu me'eis b'nei Yisrael, when you take from a Israelite, Es ha-meiser asher nosati lochem me'itam benachlaschem. And the ikar of the pasuk is to tell you that the Levi has to separate meiser men ha-meiser. But the fact that the Torah begins by emphasizing that how did the meiser rishon come to the hand of the Levi? It came to him because it was taken, it was grown on a field that belonged to a Yisraeli. In other words, me'es b'nei Yisrael at moitzi. You only get it, you Levi, the Meiser Rishon, from an owner who's a Bnei Yisrael. Ve'einat moitzi, not miyat kohuna, nor Levia. Levia is easier, like we mentioned. It means if the Levi owns the land and he has to separate the Meiser Rishon, then he keeps it. Same thing is with the kohen. That's gavaldik. Says the Gemara. I want you to know that this limud goes together, is congruent. Va'asya ka'ai the Amar Rabbi Lazar. Also on the pasuk here in Koirach, when it says, so he learned a limud similar. That what's the me'es b'nei Yisrael? Me'es b'nei Yisrael at moitzem, but ve'ein at moitzem in agoy. You don't get ma'aser rishon from a goy. Now, guys, makes no mistake. A goy is not mechuyev in mitzvahs. So obviously, we're not talking about a scenario where the goy was the one that grew the crop and made the miruach. We already learned that many times together. Once the time of the maasros kicked in, it was not under the ownership of a Jew. That product never needs to be tithed. So what is the case of Rabbi Elazar? Have a look inside the Rash Sevilio, mamash in middle of the right column, in the beginning, almost in the V'i at the moitzim yad goy. So it says that Rash Sevilio that this was explained by Masechtas Demai, beperek alekech menan nachtoim, is the following: Gabahalekeyach peiris telushin. Min hagoy, you bought product that was already detached prior to the meruach. Mafresh truma utrumas meiser mehalacha. You have to separate trumas meiser because the meruach was done under the ownership of a Jew. Not only that, when it comes to truma in which there is sanctity, you have to give it l'shevet. L'shevet means to the kohen. But something is amazing. The kohen has to pay for the truma. V'noitel dama min hashevet. So mafarish b'perikama de b'choyros. So how the Gemara explains it in Mesechta b'choyros, that since the meruach happened under the ownership of the yid, that's important. In other words, the case was that you bought it from a goy after the goy detached it, before the goy made the meruach. If the goy made the meruach, then nothing has to be tithed. Here, the yid made the meruach. Now, if the Yid made the meruach, then you would argue, well, the time of the trigger of the chiyuv of maasros, it became banafai tevel while it belonged to a Yid. You're right. So it has to be tithed. But the owner doesn't have to gift it. Why not? Ha-maasros financially belongs to him. Why? Because the owner can tell the recipient, Mishum da Amar asina mekoich gavra d'lemotzes lishto yodino. I got this product from someone, which is from the guy, from whom in a din Torah you would get nothing. So I'm not going to have to give that which the person from whom I bought it did not have to give, as a logic. Here, I want to make it very clear. Here you see the huge difference between separating and versus giving. Amazing case where you're chayiv to separate, but you get to sell it. And by the way, you know what you have to sell? Only the truma has to be gifted, and then you charge, not gifted, given, sold, and then you get money for it. My sedition has no kedusha. My sedition you don't have to give at all. What's the point? So coming back to our Gemara, why are we comparing this to Rabbi Elazar? Because we learned from Rabbi Elazar that there is a difference between separating and between giving. They are two very different things, which is exactly what we're saying over here. We're saying that even according to the Manda Amrim that hold that a kohen is not allowed to receive Ma'aser Rishon, but if he is the one that owned it and he separated it, then he gets to keep it. Separating and giving don't travel on the same track in a very different way, but this is the common underline, and that's the link between our sugya and Ka'ai the Amar Rabbi Elazar.
The Jew who bought it from a non-Jew, he can sell it to anyone, or it has to be a Kohen?
Well, whoever buys it, who's not a Kohen, can own it but cannot eat it. In other words, merchants buy and sell produce. Right. There's nothing wrong buying and selling truma.
Okay, so it's the eating part. Got it.
Correct. Now says the Gemara, let's go back to this sugya itself, whether a Kohen is allowed to be the recipient of someone else's Ma'aser Rishon or not. A machlokes tanoim, Rabbi Bo Amar. This is an alta machlokes, and that is between Ispalgun Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya, who's a Levi, and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, who's a Kohen. Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya, in other words, it sounds like everyone was saying what's good for them. Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya was saying, "Ein noisnen ma'aser lekahuna." Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is saying, "Yes, noisnen ma'aser lekahuna." Most of Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya, Elazar ben Azariah, the Gemara is going to quote some of their debate. And the end of this will be that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah will concede to Rabbi Yeshua. V'haksiv, does it not say in Parshas Koirach that v'achaltem oisoi b'chol makom? This is in reference to Ma'aser Rishon, and b'chol makom means even though there's a machlokes tanoim, but we're going with the majority opinion and with the halacha that there is no sanctity in Ma'aser Rishon. Also, that would also mean, unlike truma that has kedusha, Forget about the kohen who's not allowed to walk into a Beis HaChaim. Aside of that, you can't bring the truma into a cemetery. You can't make truma tamei. You have to guard the truma. Ma'aser Rishon, which has no sanctity, that's the understanding of this limud, and therefore it could be eaten anywhere. You can take it into the graveyard, but you can eat it in a graveyard. Now, if you were to give it to a kohen, this is what Rabbi Shua ben Chanani is telling Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Can a kohen go and eat it in a graveyard? Of course not. In other words, even if there's no issue with the Ma'aser Rishon, the Chefza, but a kohen, the Gavra, is not allowed to become Tamei Meis. How great! So that in itself is a source that excludes kohuna from Ma'aser Rishon. So Amalei responds to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah that what's the meaning of B'chol Makom? B'chol Makom means everywhere, but who told you it comes to include a Beis HaChaim? B'chol Makom comes to include in the Azara. In other words, if not for this pasuk, you know what you would think? You would think that Chayis Kachim can be eaten in the Azara. You would think that. I would even say not even Kachei Kalam. Because why? If you can eat it in Yerushalmi, why would you eat it in the holiest of places? Same thing is with Meiser or with Truma. Maybe you are not allowed to eat it in the Azara. That's the B'chol Makom. That you are allowed to eat it even in the Azara. In other words, it's not coming to the B'chol Makom, even in the Beis HaChaim. Bottom line is that a kohen is allowed to be the recipient of Ma'aser Rishon, and since you're, by the way, a Levi cannot go into the Azara. Even a kohen, you can only go in there when you're doing something that's purposeful there. But a Levi can go into the Azara. I take it back. Even a Yisrael can go into the Azara. The point is that the B'chol Makom is teaching you that it may be eaten in the Azara and not in the Beis HaChaim. Amalei.
I don't really understand it, the whole question from the cemetery. Why can't you say Levium can eat their Ma'aser Rishon in the cemetery? And Kohanim can't. So they have to eat it outside of the cemetery.
So okay, I got it. So
it's eaten in the cemetery. By who? By the ones that are allowed to go there.
So he understands that since the Torah says B'chol Makom, the Torah is hinting through that, not a kohen. Because the kohen cannot eat it B'chol Makom. Whoever cannot have it B'chol Makom cannot get it. Okay. Amalei. So says Rabbi Shua to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, v'haksiv atem uveschem. We're talking here about the Ma'aser Rishon. If the B'chol Makom means even in the Azara, that can be. Because ve'isha nechnesas la'azara. So therefore, the B'chol Makom has to refer to the Beis HaChaim. And if it refers to the Beis HaChaim, at least according to the way Rabbi Shua ben Chanani understands it, you understand what the Gabbai is saying. Okay, Nishkafrelach. So if you could eat it in the Beis HaChaim, in other words, B'chol Makom is about the Ma'aser Rishon itself. Now, if you have an additional restriction on you, so you can't go in there because of your kohen, but that's not the way Rabbi Shua ben Chanani understands it. Okay, says the Gemara. Rabbi Bo have a mishtoah hahon uvda. After we have this Mesoira of the Machlokes of Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, so Rabbi Abba told us the following, that you should know.
Rabbi Yeshua we're learning right now, would he dispute what we just learned previously? That a kohen is allowed to keep his own.
Everyone will agree to that. Everyone will agree to that.
Okay, so then you would have a question on the from the Beis HaChaim on that also.
At least some of the Ma'aser Rishon he can eat B'chol Makom. Okay, weiter. Rab Abba v'mishtoi b'hon uvda. That Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Yolif Meisaf Ma'asra the Chado Gina. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, he Lishitasai, don't forget, he held as a kohen, he's allowed to be the recipient of Ma'aser Rishon, and there was a certain Bal Hagina, there was a certain gardener that that person's recipient of the Ma'aser Rishon was Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Happened to be that the way physically you would enter the garden would be two ways. Echad l'mekayim tuma, the echad pasuach l'mekayim tara. In other words, that the Gina opened up on one side to a Beis HaChaim. That was the way you would enter. You would walk through a Beis HaChaim to go into the Gina, and then there was another entrance. Now, Nofak Rabbi Akiva, Legabe, the Rabbi Akiva went and he met this gardener and he told him, Psach Hon, make sure that the Pesach to the Gina, the one that goes through the Beis HaChaim, should be the one, the exclusive one. should be the only one that stays open, usesoim hahan, and close the other one. In other words, Rabbi Akiva clearly sided with Rabbi Shua ben Chananya, and he wanted to make sure that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah will be unable to receive the Ma'aser Rishon. And in Asa, if he'll come, I mean, that is what the gardener wanted, that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah should be the recipient of the Ma'aser Rishon. Emor lei, tell him, shout to him, Bo baderech hazeh, you make come to the Beis HaKvares. In other words, the way he's telling the Balagina that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah cannot receive it. If he wants to receive it, he can't be a kohen. Now, Rabbi Akiva was afraid that he's going to tell Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah the only entrance is through the Beis HaKvares. And you know what the kohen might do, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah? He might send the shliach, a Talmud, to receive it. Guys, don't forget that if the Talmud, who's not a kohen, Levi or Yisro, walks with the Ma'aser Rishon through the Beis HaChaim, the Ma'aser Rishon will become Tamei. It doesn't matter. When the kohen is Tamei, I'm saying that because midrabanan, if you eat food that's Tamei in a certain shear, it's much more than a kazais, whatever that shear is, you become Tamei. Kohen should not become Tamei. It doesn't matter. But if he's already Tamei, he can eat it. And that Shalach Talmidei, if Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah will react by saying, okay, if that's the only entrance, it's mine, and I'll get someone to take it for me. So then Emor lei, then you should tell him, again in Parshas Koirach, Hashem writes the words Atem. Okay, V'achaltem, I'm reading inside the Torah Oira Sholem, V'achaltem oisoi, that's the Levi. B'chol mokem Atem uveschem, and Atem uveschem is a limud that what? That only you imagine can receive it. How great is that? I want to tell you that halachically there is no such a rule. There is no such a rule that a Levi cannot, or a Kohen, cannot send a shliach to be mekabel, to receive on their behalf. There is no such a rule. Rabbi Akiva told the Balagina, Atem. Now what will happen is, for people who know the Torah Shabbal Peh, he's going to hear this Atem, he's going to tell him, where did you learn this Atem from? He's going to tell him Rabbi Akiva, which is what Rabbi Akiva wanted. Rabbi Akiva knew that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah and Rabbi Yeshua, both of them had tremendous reverence to Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva wanted to know that my opinion is you, a kohen, cannot receive it. And by the way, that is what did it. Sholach Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah v'Amar. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, when he heard what the Bal Hagina told him, and he figured out, he asked him that this is what Rabbi Akiva said. So Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said that Marzo'ah, the Akiva ben Yosef Balakan, the whip of Akiva ben Yosef came over here. Meaning, look inside the Maraf folded, the second line under the Gemara, Marzo'ah, Ritzuasa, his whip, his Ritzuah, Kolaimer, Gizei Roisav, a Tachbul Oisav, his decrees, and his Tachbulois. How do you say Tachbulois in English? His conniving, if that's the way you pronounce it, which is Shemimenu Yotzu Advarim Alolum. And he was mekabelit. And Ba'oisa Shah, at that moment, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah not only conceded that he as a kohen is not allowed to receive Ma'aser Rishon, but Hechzir Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah kol ha-Ma'aser shenotal. Can you imagine? All of the Ma'aser Rishon that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah ever received, now that he accepted the opinion that holds that a kohen is not allowed to be its recipient, so then there was a financial debt he had with Levium, and he paid it back. That was a real retraction. That's not a tshuva mikanu lahaba. That shows you that tshuva, a real tshuva, goes lemafreya. So doinus nasi like yizachias, but that means you have to make restitution. He made restitution. How great is that? Now, the Gemara wants to point out that had Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah already have held his opinion for an established amount of time, whatever that means, it would have been very difficult to change his opinion. This worked because Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah and Rabbi Shua ben Chanania, they were new at this debate. And that's the aphorisms that aphorisms that we spoke out. And the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elazar. two expressions. There's an expression that says that kasa b'sherusa boye meluye. It's interesting, a physical thing. Wine evaporates quicker than wine that's about to turn vinegary. For sure more than vinegar. So when you have fresh wine and you want to see to it that your cup is full, so then being that wine evaporates, you fill up the cup, it evaporates, you have to keep on filling it. That's the way the Marav Fulda learns Pshat. In other words, the closer the wine gets to becoming vinegary, the less it evaporates, the less effort you have to make to fill it up. People use that expression. By the way, wine that's left uncovered for it to evaporate is wine that we are not allowed to drink. It's just an expression to show you that once something is sitting for a long amount of time, it stays fixed, doesn't evaporate. When it's fresh, easy come, easy go. Just came in, it can just go out. Daf nun daled amid beis. But once the kisa means it's close to becoming vinegar, then minei ubei, then what you have in there stays full. It doesn't mean that it stays full. Everything evaporates over time, but it evaporates a lot less. That's one type of aphorism. Aphorism, thank you. And another aphorism, same idea, but coming from another direction, from the other side, that kol gumra de loy kavya, bishaita is loy kavya. A coal that doesn't burn right away, if a coal doesn't chop right away, then it's for sure not going to burn later, because a coal gets progressively less hot. In other words, in the beginning, there's something about the beginning. If you want to make a change, make it at the beginning. Once there is a passage of time, it's harder to make a change. Rabbi Akiva, who found out that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is allowing himself to be Makabel, to be the recipient of Ma'aser Rishon, he found that out right away in the beginning of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah's, so to say, opinion. And Rabbi Akiva, who made this effort to intervene, he didn't even wait to, when he'll meet him later, he'll have a machloikis in the Beis HaMedrash. He didn't do that. He went to the Bal Hagina and he told him what to say and he told him what to do, because he knew that if there is a chance, which he succeeded in turning over the opinion of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, it needs to be right away in the beginning. Gewalt.
So fit with the Takana of Ezra, that we know that when he came back after the second Beis Hamikdash, that it said it should not go to the Levim.
And it's amazing. So first of all,
that be what was established?
So first of all, as we learn right now, that this is really a machloikas Tanoim and a machloikas Hamoraim. We also see from our Gemara, and however you'll understand it, that everyone was siding for their benefit. Rabbi Shua ben Chanani was a Levi. He said only Levium. Ezra was the Kohen. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was the 10th generation from Ezra. Exactly. Now, even when we learned the Sugi in the Bavli, we spoke out that there was a big machloikas whether that knas was only for that generation, or whether from then on, that's the way it became. And clearly, here in the Yerushalmi, we're seeing that there are some who hold that it was never okay. We're not going against the knas of Ezra, but it was a very limited knas.
10 generations, that's a long time for you to have this Ma'aser Rishon that people don't know should have gone to the
Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was right away turned over. And the reason why he held that way is Mustama, because he knew that since Ezra made a thing then, is that a Kohen can always be the recipient. And Rabbi Akiva told him, no, a Kohen is not allowed to be the recipient. That was an extraordinary knas, according to these opinions, according to Rabbi Akiva. He gave it to a recipient that really should not be allowed to have it. Now, also understand something, guys, that Ma'aser Rishon has no kedusha. Ma'aser Rishon is a financial gift that God gave to the Levium. But when it comes to Din of the Mamayna, we know because of Hefker, Beis Din Hefker, it's not the end of the world. Forget about Ma'aser Rishon. If I own something, Beis Din has the right not only to depossess me, they can depossess it from me and they can gift it to you. They can say something is mine, is yours. They have that koyach.
eminent domain.
In Gittin, there are two limudim for Hefker, Beis and Hefker. I remember this from Rab Leib. I forgot the two psukim. And the reason why there are two psukim, I think the Rashba says it, is that from one pasuk you see that they can take it away from the owner. And from the second source, you mamish see, I think it's from Yeshua, that when Yeshua made Chalukas Haaretz, Yeshua had the koyach. Yeshua needed to needed to work out. Everyone should be relatively content with what they got. And there was certainly times where in order to make things right, he took something from A and he gave it to B. Okay, let's go weiter. Okay, now we're going back to the end of the Mishnah in Halacha Gimel. The Mishnah taught us, Chavre, that when it comes to Meiser Rishon, biur of Meiser Rishon, Vadai by Meiser Sheni, Slicha, forget about Meiser Rishon. That biur of Meiser Sheni means you have to destroy it. The only question will be, what happens if you have a dish, a tafshil, that is a mixture of Meiser Sheni and Chulin? And now comes this man habir. So without the Mishnah, first of all, the machlekes Beishamai and Beisilol. But normally you would say, what do you mean a mixture? Is it batal b'shishim? Is it not batal b'shishim? If it's batal b'shishim, halachically, it's not a mixture. It means if the Meiser Sheni is so little that there are 60 times chulin against it or more, it's in the ratio of 1 and 60 or more, that's not called a mixture. We're speaking about a case where when it comes to Isser v'heter, it's not batal b'shishim. Nevertheless, you have a machlekes Beishamai and Beisilol, as we'll read inside the Gemara over here. That Beishamai, just to know, Beishamai is the one that holds l'chumra. That since it's, like I mentioned, it's not batal, halachically it's there, so you have to destroy it. There's no way of you destroying the Meiser Sheni without you also destroying the chulin, azoy. So you're going to lose the whole thing. You should have eaten it before, my friend. Beisilol is the one that holds that the very fact that it's mixed, that is its destruction. This is very important. And clarifies or limits the Gemara, their machlekes. Hakol moedim, everyone agrees that if the mixture is either of bread or of oil, bread or oil, both of them, guys, do not blend in a dish. Don't think about today when you have all of these machines that chop everything up. When you put little pieces of bread, croutons, in a salad, they're be'en. You can see them. They don't blend. Oil, beteva. On one hand, is mifafeya bekulei. That's the paradox of oil. But on the other hand, we know oil floats to the top. It's if the Meiser Sheni is something that remains discernible, not only can you identify it, but you know that it is the Meiser Sheni. The little shtiklach broit is the Meiser Sheni. If the oil, we're talking about you have a salad, you put oil of Meiser Sheni into a chulindik, who knows what, greens, the oil you can see. Everyone will agree, even base Hillel, that you have to destroy it. And again, if it means the only way you get to destroy the oil, because the oil, sticks to everything, is by you destroying the salad, so be it. On the other hand, now it's gavaldik. If the mixture of Meiser Sheni and Chulin is wine, guys, wine and wine, liquid and liquid, they blend. Or if you have a tafshil means tavlin, think about it. It mamish blends. Everyone will agree that shehukim mevuar, that's great, because it's mamish unrecognizable, even though we know it's not batal b'shishim, since it's b'chlal not recognizable. Everyone will agree that you don't have to do anything. Where do they argue? Mapligin, when you have a tafshil, when you have a cooked dish, not bread or oil. Okay? So let me just give you an example, guys. You have a fruit compote. I'm not talking about a compote where everything is mushed up. No, where you have the Yiddish compote, you have a little stick. You have a fruit salad. So now you had one apple of Meiser Sheni, and you had 50 apples of chulin. The pieces don't blend, but they look alike. I'm using the word unrecognizable, meaning it's there, but you don't know which is which. There is where you have the machlokes. Non-discernible. Non-discernible. That's the key. Not blended, but not discernible. Here is where Beishamai says, well, since it's not blended, you're looking at Meiser Sheni. Now, do you know which one is the Meiser Sheni? No, who cares? But you're looking at it. It's there. It's be'en. Therefore, tzarech levayir. The great. You're right that the pieces are recognizable, but you don't know which one is which. If you don't know which one is which, that's considered mevuar. Gavaldik. Ooh. And now I see I made a mistake in the intro. There's another machlokes in the Mishnah, and the Gemara is going to go back to. This is the final machlokes in Halacha Gimel, and that is when it comes to bisman hazeh. Bisman hazeh means prior to the building of the third Beis Hamikdash, in which we are not allowed to eat meiser sheni. Question is, when the zman of biur comes, what do you need to do? So it's amazing. And Beis Shammai says, as I think, you have to destroy, but you don't get to destroy the food. Can you imagine? Why? Because since the food was not allowed to be eaten because there's no Beis Hamikdash, when does the Torah say that you destroy the food when you could have eaten it? If you never were allowed to eat it, so what should you do? First of all, Bachlal, what they did was they let it rot. Make no mistake. If halachically it was considered rotten or decomposed, then it's already mavur. We're speaking about the scenario where you have meiser sheni, and it's not fully rotten. Whether the definition of rotten is not roy lachilas kelev or not roy lachilas adam, I don't know. But it came to a point, if it's not yet rotten, Beis Shammai says you have to be mechalel it on money. Imagine. And then you destroy the money. Make no mistake. You know how you destroy money? Mordechai, how do you destroy money? Give it to me. I'll show you. In one moment, it'll become no money. Okay. So, Tzarech al kesef. And Beis Hillel says, no. Beis Hillel says, I don't understand. Biur, if you can do biur on the money, you can do biur on the food. So says the Gemara, what's underlying this machlokes? My comma in the Yerushalmi always means what's the sources. So all of this comes from the psukim that we have in Parshas Re'eh. Look inside the Torah Oira Sholem Venosata Bakosef. That's the option that if you want to be paid the food of Meiser Sheni, you can redeem it onto money. And then the Torah says, V'tzarta hakesef biyotcha v'holachta lamok. Yerushalmi HaKodesh. Now, 1 second. The second hakesef is extra. That's the key over here. Because it's in the same verse. It says, V'nosato bakosef, and the Torah could have says, V'tzarta biyotcha. Right, Shlomo? And take it in your hand. So that's the limud. Since it says V'tzarta, underline the word hakesef biyotcha. So it says, who comes the Beis Shammai, and they teach bilvad biyotcha. Now, so many ways of understanding the words bilvad biyotcha. I looked at yesterday. Look inside the Rash Shirilio, in middle of the right column. It's around 10 lines from the top. It's in middle. Second word in the line. Ubilvad biyotcha kishetignois retzoyne loimer shetikvar biyotcha ubilvad kesef. That when you have to, bury means to destroy. When you have to destroy, when do you have to destroy Meiser Sheni? Bisman habiur, the only thing you get to destroy is hakesef. How great is that? Amazing. Now, obviously, Bisman habayis, what are you talking about? Biur is on the food. So this is referring to when you can't eat it. But he has a svara that since the food was not edible to begin with, then you don't destroy the food. But you have to destroy it. Redeem it onto money, and then destroy the money. By the way, we just learned Rambam not that long ago that Rambam writes that that midas chasidus, right, is to redeem it shava b'shava. We just had this, and by the letter of the law, you get to redeem it on a lesser amount of money. So it helps. It's, in other words, you can't eat it. So what should I do with it? If you want to go beyond the letter of the law, you're going to do it shava b'shava, which is the whole Yerushalmi. You do it on its value. But if not, you redeem it on a shava pruta, and the pruta, which is what they do nowadays, the pruta is thrown into the Yam HaMelech, or you bury it. Okay, so that's Beis Shammai from the extra word hakesef. My time of the Beis Hillel, Beis Shammai had an extra kesef. Beis Hillel didn't have extra money. You can say money twice. We need the first money, guys. We need the second money. So he says, "My time of the Beis Hillel, afilu mechalala." He's saying asfarim. It can be that this extra word is telling you the way Beis Shammai is understanding it. In other words, if I am not allowed to consume the meiser sheni, and I'm chayiv to do biur, and we already established biur by meiser sheni means you got to destroy it. You got to burn it. You got to make it into crumbs and throw it into the wind. You got to destroy the food. What logic would there be? You can't destroy the food, but redeem it on money and destroy the money. L'may nafka. You're being mevayed. Now, what Beis Hillel does with the extra kesef, maybe Beis Hillel, they give it to tzedakah. There's no such a thing as extra money. Right? Okay. Talking about a limit. I know that. Okay. Chevra, moving on to the new Mishnah, to Halacha Dalet. Guys, we are marching already towards the end of the Masechta, and this is the second to last. If I'm not mistaken, this is the second to last, not the last Mishnah. Halacha Dalet. So says the Holy Mishnah. There are two dinim that this Mishnah is addressing. Din number one is that Amar Rabbi Yehuda, says the Tana Rabbi Yehuda, B'Rishoina means initially in the older times, that Beis Din would have the responsibility to send shluchim to remind balabatim that live outside Yerushalmi. And what did they need a reminder for? Maharu v'hiskinu espedo sechem. So like I mentioned in the intro, when you own produce, especially if you are the farmer, you live out there, you're not a city boy that you buy it in the market. Prior to the Meruach, the food is not even biblically called tevel. And therefore, you don't even see, they separated truma by the threshing floor. You didn't even bring it to the threshing floor to smooth out. So initially, they were of the opinion that you know how strong is the obligation of biur. The obligation of biur means that even if your product did not reach the oinas hamaisres, it was not even tevel. Biur means you have to bring it to the chiyuv of tevel, and you have to separate it, and you have to give it to the right recipients. And the ma'aser sheni either take to Yerushalmi or destroy. Part of the obligation of biur is bringing your product to that stage, even though it's not even tevel yet. And they would remind people. And they would remind people, shaloi tagia shas habiur. How amazing is that? In other words, the obligation of biur applies even to non-tevel product, but a product that at some point is going to reach the stage of tevel. And this went on, who knows for how many years? Mistama the whole time is of Bayesheni. Rabbi Akiva. Till Rabbi Akiva came, and he had a limud, and he taught that shekol pedai shaloi bol oinas hamaisres means, I know that we learned really what it means. Here it means if it did not reach the Meruach, if it's not biblical tevel, that product is not included in the obligation of biur. Pturim in biur. How great is that? If there's no chiyuv of being ma'aser, then there's no chiyuv in biur. And therefore, he stopped this sending out shluchim to remind. There's nothing for people to be reminded of. Now, it could be that they had shluchim that reminded people that the truma that you have in your house, the ma'aser rishon you have in your house, the ma'aser sheni that you have in your house, the zman biur is coming. Don't forget, it's only twice in a 7-year cycle. Sometimes people can forget that, yeah. But you're not chayiv to bring your product into the stage of chiyuv in order for you to do the obligation. You know, it's al derech we find wearing tzitzis. If you're not wearing a beged, a halachic ksus, has a minimum shear, v'chulei. Machlek is whether it has to be only what material, according to the Rambam, only wool and linen. And by the way, we don't wear tzitzis on linen begadim by rabbinic law, because since tzitzis ideally comes with tchelis, and tchelis has to be done on wool, and linen and wool is taka mutter when it comes to the mitzvah, but that's only when there's a mitzvah. So if we're going to learn the machlekas rishonim ksus laila is exempt the way we learn it also in halacha that at night you're not obligated to wear tzitzis. There's a machlekas about this rishonim. Then if you're wearing shatnez at night, you're violating shatnez because there's no mitzvah saseh. So to prevent people from violating shatnez, the Chachamim says linen garments, don't wear linen garments for tzitzis. They're all predicated because they have to have tchelis on it. How do I get fakrach there? I don't know. Oh, I'm saying b'chlal that you can say I'm not chayv to wear a beged of dalet kanfus and I'm not chayv to wear tzitzis. You're right. Same thing over here. In other words, are you chayv to bring yourself to a chiyuv? Initially, yes. Rabbi Akiva said no. That's topic number one. Topic number two is a ma'aseh mit story, and that is What happens if the time of Biur is coming? All of these trips you read in the Haggadah, right? They were traveling. Maisa ben Abelazar ben Azari, all of these Tanoim, they were traveling and they had a Seder together. That means that they were traveling before Pesach, and that means they were not home for Pesach. It's another whole topic we learned together, whether a person is b'chal allowed to leave his family for Yom Tov. You have a machlokes. Some people speak very harshly about that. But be that as it may, coming back over here. So mi shahaya peroisev rechoikim mimenu. And this mama schwitz these stories because when is the time of Biur? Let's go with the gears of our Mishnah. Erev Pesach. So a person is not home for Pesach. They're traveling. And they know that in their home, they have Truma. In their home, they have Meiser Rishon. In their home, they have Meiser Ani. What do you do? So the Mishnah says you have to do Biur. How do you do Biur? Tzarech likrois lahem shem. By the way, shame here doesn't mean that you proclaim it to be Truma. That's not what it means over here. Tzarech likrois lahem shem means that you have to verbalize who will be its recipient. That the Truma that I have in my house, I am gifting to, and you mentioned to Ezra HaKohen, to Rabbi Elazar ben Azario, you mentioned the name of the recipient. You mentioned, I'm giving my sedishin to Rabbi Shua ben Chananya, now that we know all of these names. Now the problem is, just declaring to whom you're going to gift something in itself doesn't resolve, because they have to legally own it. How do they own it? How do you make a transference of ownership of metaltalin when the kinyan of metaltalin is going to be Meshicha, it's going to be Hagbah, but the recipient is not there to lift it or to draw it? And the answer is that there's something called kinyan chatzir, or there's something called kinyan agav karka. That's the whole sugya we have in Kedushin. So for example, if I have something that I want to transfer to you, if you rent the land upon which that item is sitting, rent, I'm not giving you my land, but I'm renting. For how much? For a pruta. So now, and you can give me the money. So you give me a pruta. Now you own the land. And when you make the kinyan on the land, I tell you that agav the land, together with the rental, you're getting whatever is on the land. And even if that item is immovable, it's going to go with it, or kinyan chatzit, one way or the other, which is exactly what happened. Now, Maisa Rabban Gamliel, and the Zakanim, and we will see who the Zakanim are. They're not mentioned by name because Rabban was the leader, the head of the Sanhedrin. He's named, and with all of the Chevra around. They were traveling. And by the way, this could have been the story of the Haggadah, unless they traveled often. But they were traveling, and they were not going to make it home on time for Pesach. And the time of Biur is coming, and they did not distribute it. Don't forget that other than in Meiser Sheni, Biur means make sure that the recipient receives it. So Amar Rabban Gamliel, and that's the Karashem. Isur Sha'ani Asid Lamud. The 10% that I'm going to measure out. Now, by the way, in this story, Rabban Gamliel didn't even separate the Meiser Rishon. But I want to tell you something, that the produce that he was referring to, that's the hemshech of the Mishnah, already reached Oinas HaMaisres. And we paskin that matonoi sheloi hurmu kimisha hurmu dami. So really, it makes no sense whether he didn't even separate it. Vada, you're chayiv and biur because the time of chiyuv came. Or if you separated it, it's the same thing. In his story, he didn't even separate the Meiser Rishon. So he says, that which I will separate, Meiser Rishon goes to a Levi. Who was the Levi that was with Rabbi Shua ben Chananya? And now, so first of all, he declared who will be the recipient of the gift. Now he has to make a transference. Legal. How did he do it? By umekoymai muskerloi. He rented the ground upon which the Meiser Rishon is lying. Now, what's amazing is that he didn't even separate it yet. Doesn't matter. But he made a designation of the Meiser Rishon, and the land upon which this entire pile of produce is laying is now rented to Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya, and now you can say kinyan agav, or you can say kinyan chatzir. And then he went on, Isur shani asid lamut, Isur shani asid lamut. Now we're talking about Meiser Ani. Now it's interesting, we'll see in the Gemara that Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef, he was the Gabbai Tzedakah. He was the Rabbi Reichik, Rabbi Levi Reichik. He was the one in charge of giving money out to the people that need money. To make it clear, Rabbi Akiva was very wealthy. We had a Gemara together, we learned, either in Adarim or in Nazir, 6 sources of the wealth of Rabbi Akiva, if you remember that. It's in the Nun somewhere. It was mamish fascinating, right? Many people say he was wealthy from a shver. That was a little part of it. He found a treasure. He won the lottery. He married his arch enemy's wife, who converted, and she inherited his. Remember that, Danny? Like Givaldi. So Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef was not the ani, but he was in charge of giving out the money to the aniyim. So Isur Acher Shani Yasalam and Meiser Ani, I'm giving to the Gabbai, which is another amazing thing, that once you give the Meiser Ani to the organization that gives it out, you fulfill the obligation of beer. You don't have to give it to an ani. You give it to the Gabbai of tzedakah. Nasan Akiva ben Yosef sheyiska boila aniyim. Okay, first of all, you have to declare who's the recipient. Step number one. Step number two, you have to make a transference by this king and Agav. Rabbi Yeshua. Now, Rabbi Yeshua just got Meiser. Meiser Rishon has to have from it taken Trumas Meiser. So he went weiter. So Rabbi Yeshua now said, Isur Sha'ani, they're doing business with that which they didn't have yet. That's Yiddish business. You don't even own it yet. Isur Sha'ani Yasid Lamud, Nasr Lazav and Azaria. Umakoyme Muskaloi. And then Dafnun Hev and Eskablu Zemi Zesachar. Each one gave the money for the rent, and Shalom Al Yisrael, and everyone already fulfilled the obligation of beer. Obviously, we're not mentioning Ma'aser Sheni. There's nothing you can do with Ma'aser Sheni, because Ma'aser Sheni doesn't have to go to